You're tuned in to Last Stop Waterfowl Outdoors podcast. Waterfowl hunting and conservation is our passion. We cover everything outdoors, from the blind to the banks. Come along with us as we hunt and fish our public land reserves and bayous throughout Sportsman's Paradise. Tune in for interesting interviews and takes from much of the industry's most intriguing outdoor companies, content creators, guides, and historians as we discuss various topics as they pertain to our pursuit of waterfowl and everything outdoors. This is Last Stop Waterfowl Outdoors. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now here's your host, Jacob Robery.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to an all-new episode of Last Stop Waterfowl Outdoors podcast. Well, guys, it's been about 3 to 4 weeks since we were last together here for an episode, and I'm glad to be back with all of you. If you're listening to us on audio form, whether it's Amazon Music, Apple Music, or wherever you find your favorite podcast, we just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And if you're also streaming us on video format, whether it's YouTube or Facebook, also welcome to the show, guys. Glad to have you in with us, and I'm glad to be back in the studio talking waterfowl hunting because a lot has happened since the last time that we got together, and we are now wrapping up the first split of duck season here in Louisiana. And man, when I say that, it's really hard to believe that I'm saying that already because it seems like just a couple of weeks ago, here we were, everybody was fired up. We were ready to get going for duck season. And then now, here we are literally done with one of the zones here in Louisiana, our east zone, and our west zone will be wrapping up at the end of this week. So it's kind of different this year, the way they did things. They typically open up our west zone, or what a lot of people refer to as the coastal areas. They usually open that up first, which they did do that this season. But then the east zone will typically open up a week later, which is also what happened. But what they did differently this year is they actually closed the east zone first before the west zone closed. So it was kind of odd. Although the west opened up, they get an extra week for the first split. But then they also are going to have a total of 3 splits this year. I know that could get kind of confusing to you guys, but if you don't know what I'm talking about. But if you're a hunter here in Louisiana, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about, but a little different. So us East Zone guys, if you do most of your hunting in the East Zone, you got a little bit shorter time for the first half of your season. But at the end of the year, it's all going to iron out. Everybody's going to get the same amount of days. We're all going to end up with 60 days total. And really, in the grand scheme of things, guys, it goes so damn fast, man, when you have 60 days. I know most of us, if you're a weekend hunter, you can't even hunt, a fraction of the season because you have a full-time job like I do. But I've been trying to put a dent in it, guys. And in this episode, that's what we're going to talk about. We are going to recap the first half of the season here in Louisiana. I'm going to give you my take on it. It looks like if you're watching me in video format on this episode, guys, I look like I've been through hell and back over the last couple of weeks. Man, I got the scraggly beard going, just wore out. Today is the first day that I actually got to sleep normal hours, and that's just the life of a waterfowl hunter. But I'm glad to do it. It's been a hell of a ride so far, and I'm gonna talk to you about my take on the first half of the season in this episode. That's what we're gonna discuss and we're gonna cover. So now, if you guys see the title right here at the top of the screen, or you see the title on the audio format, Feast or Famine, we are breaking down Louisiana's first split of duck season. And there's no better way I could put it, guys. If you were waterfowl hunting here in Louisiana for this first half of the season, it has been a situation of a feast or a famine for you, depending on where you are. I got guys that I talk to all over the state. I got friends that are guides here in Louisiana. I got guys that I talk to up the flyways, and it has all been somewhat of the same story. A lot of guys are really disappointed for the most part with the way the first half of the season went so far here in Louisiana. Also, other areas that opened up. I know East Texas, I have friends that I talk to there. They were disappointed with their first half of the season so far. And you know what I tell people is I say, hey, be patient, because that's what this year appears to be. It's going to be a year of patience. Every duck season is going to test your patience, and that's just the way a waterfowl season typically goes. You never know what you're going to get. You never know what conditions Mother Nature's going to throw at you. And that's pretty much been the case as well this year. So, Mr. Warren Coco, I had him on recently, the owner of Go Devil, and he said one thing that I could guarantee you, he told our audience, is that conditions are going to change from year to year, and you're never going to get the same type of results from season to season with Mother Nature. And that can't be more true in my opinion. I think he was 100% hitting the nail on the head whenever he said that, because that is the situation that we find ourselves in this year. Now, I'm gonna talk about, as far as the migration itself. Let's start out there. The migration itself, guys, we've had an extremely, extremely warm summer this year. We've had a late summer this year. We're now just at the beginning of December as we record this new episode with you guys. And we had our first major cold front just this past week here in Louisiana. So that's the first cold front or major cold front that we've had that has, been around the state to be able to at least give us a chance to bring some migratory birds in with a new wave of birds. Let me say that. And what I mean by that is, October into October, late September after teal season, the October months, in the early November, we always typically get a first wave of birds that make their ways down to Louisiana. So what you'll start seeing at that point is a lot of, your blue-winged teal. They're already here, down here. You start seeing more make their way into the state. But then you'll also get other species like your gray ducks, your gadwall. If you're lucky, you'll get some green-winged teal early, which that has been the case, it looks like, here this year. We've got a couple of, areas that have been holding some green-winged teal. So that's been good to see. But, for the most part, it's going to be blue-winged teal first split. It's going to be gadwall. You're going to have spoonbill in the rice fields. And then if you're lucky on a good year, you'll start getting some specks showing up, that type of stuff down in the rice fields. Well, this year has been a little bit different, guys. The weather, with us having that warm summer, as hot as it's been, and a late summer, if you look up the flyways all the way up to, Canada, the Dakotas, all those areas, it has been extremely warm in those areas for the start of the duck season, So I had a friend of mine that went to Canada back in, I think that was in October he went. It was either September or October. And then I had another set of friends that made a trip that they go to the Dakotas every year in October as well. And, man, it was extremely warm when they were up there. And my buddy who went to Canada, he drove from Louisiana all the way up to Canada. So he was able to kind of see the migration taking place, or if there was a migration taking place back just a month or two ago. And he had told me, he said, Jacob, we were on the phone in contact with each other the whole way up there. And he told me, he said, Jacob, he says, I really did not see any kind of migration or concentration of ducks. He said, even in the Dakotas, he said, until I hit Canada. He says, once I got into Saskatchewan and those areas like that, he says, that's when I started seeing a little bit of a concentration of waterfowl that was congregating together. And that was odd. The point of that is to say that was odd for that time of year, because typically those birds have started to make their way out of Canada at that point in time, and they're starting to make that journey down south, down the flyways. So he knew right there. He says, I think, in my opinion, it's going to be a late migration. I think we're going to be delayed a little bit if we don't get some cold weather or some major cold weather, locking up Canada, locking up the Dakotas, and pushing some of those birds down south. And that's pretty much what has unraveled so far, guys, because they did not get cold weather in those areas in the amount of time that they normally get it. And they still had a large concentration of birds that were up in Canada, up in the Dakotas, and they got a late migration in the Dakotas and on down. So I think that really kind of delayed us. The birds stayed up north a lot longer than we're used to, and then they typically do. And I think that's something that has delayed our migration down here further down south in the lower portions of the flyway. Even as we record this episode today, this is December 2nd, I believe we're in. I'm sorry, I'm lost with my days, guys. Y'all know how it is once we get rolling as waterfowl hunters. But I think even now we're delayed, especially if you're in the southern portions of Louisiana down south. So your coastal regions, your lower areas of the state. I still think we have not seen a really good push of birds in our area. There are birds here, don't get me wrong, and I want to clarify on that. There are definitely birds that have made their way down here to Louisiana. I just don't think that we saw a big push or a large concentration of birds in the migration yet. I think that that's going to probably occur with this cold front that occurred this past week. You're going to see those birds. It looks like we have another cold front scheduled for this coming weekend, which will be the last weekend of the west zone, and then it's going to close and will be closed on both zones. During that time frame, I think we're going to get another big push of birds. That's just my thoughts on it from what I'm seeing the migration looking like right now. And I think that push is going to be a good push for us to kick off the second split of the season, and we're probably going to see a larger number of birds as we get ready to open up the second half of the season or the second split of the season. And I think that's going to be across the state. I think, for the most part, the concentration of birds that we've seen, a lot of the birds that we have seen down here have been, congregated in certain areas of the state. And specifically when I'm talking about that, areas, on the eastern side of the state, some of your coastal marshes there, you've had a good concentration of birds during the first split. Also on the western side, areas like Lacassine, places like that have good concentration of some birds that are there or have been hanging around during the first split. And there were birds to be had first split. Now, I'm going to delve into, what I think has led to the famine side of it, as far as not only having a delayed migration, but I'm also going to key in and tell you guys, give you my take. Let me say that. Give you my take on some of the things that I have definitely saw during the first half of the season that may have hindered some of your hunts and some of your success during the first split. I know it's done it for us, and I think a lot of you guys would probably agree once we talk about that. But as far as the migration goes, getting back to it, I think that's been pretty much the deal for the first half of the season here in Louisiana. I think we're in a delayed migration. We just haven't got that big push of birds that we would typically see, normally at this time of year. Now, if you've followed us through the years, you've heard us talk about, we've kept numbers through the years, guys, of first half of the season versus the second half of the season here in Louisiana. And what typically tends to be the best, half of the season, or let me say that, or what's the more productive half of the season. Now, a lot of people, when I was growing up, a lot of our elders, and I've talked about this before, they would always say, oh, man, the second half of the season in Louisiana is going to be where it's at. That's when the birds show up. It's the coldest months of the year. We get our big fronts, and that's when the birds tend to come down here. Well, if you look at statistics and numbers through the years that I've kept and other hunters have kept, and we've had this conversation, guys that have been doing this for a very, very long time, a lot of experience hunting here in Louisiana. If you look at the numbers, a lot of that was not true through the years. Now, maybe many, many years ago, my grandfather, your grandfather, maybe that was the case back then. But since I've been keeping numbers, coming up through college, in my early years of hunting and other people that I've talked to, numbers will show statistics-wise that the first half of the season here in Louisiana tends to be the biggest producer of waterfowl for a lot of hunters. Now, that may not be the case everywhere in the state. You may have a lease, or you may have a place that you hunt and you say, hey, I'm keeping my numbers, Jacob, and that's not really true in my area. But overall, this is just from conversations and other people that keep data as hunters through the season, their duck counts of what they harvest throughout the year. That's what I've determined and what they've also determined. And we've had those correlations in conversation that match up to each other. So in my opinion, I think a lot of the migration typically shows up for us early in the season. You'll have your better days first split of the season, and then it'll kind of taper off from there on the duck numbers. Now, with that being said, this year, I think it could be completely different, I think that this year, with that delayed migration and us having a late push of those birds out of Canada, out of the Dakotas, and on down the flyways, I think that the second half of the season could be where the magic's going to happen. I think our better days are yet to come, and I think we're going to have, hopefully, a very, very good second half to the season. One thing, so I've heard several guys, they said, man, we're having a repeat of last season. Last season sucked. We were in a drought. It was just a horrible year. We didn't have a really good year. I really don't think that's the case, and this is just my opinion when I say this. I don't think that this is the case this year. I don't think it's a repeat of that. I think, yes, we have had periods where we went without rain, but then also heading into the season, right before the season, we did get some nice rainfall that filled up a lot of the areas that you guys are probably hunting, and water might not necessarily be an issue for you like it was last season. I know for us, we hunt a lot of public land, and that's what we've stayed on for the most part. The first half of this season is public land, and we had areas last year that literally you could walk across in the woods, in areas that were along the coastal marshes. The coastal marsh, let me say that. The coastal marsh is typically going to have water. It's tidal. You guys that hunt the coastal marshes, you're not going to fight with the water issues necessarily as much as the guys that hunt in the woods in maybe, say, central part of Louisiana, the rice fields, that type of stuff. Last year, it was completely dry. Rice fields, western part of the state, a lot of guys couldn't pump water into the rice fields because we were in such a drought that they couldn't pump any kind of water because of the salinity. They couldn't allow that salt water to be pumped in and irrigate these rice fields to be able to hold water, because it would have killed the crops. It would have did some damage with the salt water. So you look at this year, it's not at all that situation. It seems like western portion of the state, you guys have water. The rice fields are fine. Seems like, in the woods, central part of the state, upper portions of the state, North Louisiana, Monroe, Ouachita, all those areas, you guys have water for the most part, especially more than last year, let's say that. And it looks like it's only going to get better as we head into the later half of the season, to the second part of the season. So I have to disagree a little bit with people that say, hey, it's just like last year with another situation like it was last year. I don't think that that's the case at all. I think we are sitting in a different situation than we were last year. I think the main thing is that the migration has just been delayed, is what it is. You guys may disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. You may think, something different, but I think that that's the situation. The migration has been delayed, and we're just having a little bit pushback in the season, a little bit later. So does that mean we're going to have a jam-up second half of the season? We're going to finish real strong? I hope so. I hope that is the case. I hope that once those birds make it down the flyway, that we have a really, really good finish to the season and second half of the season. I think water levels will continue to rise. If you are a little bit low on water in certain areas, I think you're going to be good there as far as looking at the precipitation forecast of what they're showing. It does look like we have another cold front, like I said, going to hit this coming week. So by the time the actual split shuts down here in Louisiana and nobody's out there hunting, we're going to have another push of cold weather, it looks like. And then therefore, when we're going to open up that second half of the season, that second split, it should be pretty good, I'm hoping, in that situation, if it all comes together as it looks like it may. So that's really the key, guys. I think that has been the main factor of us having, a tough first split. If you have had a tough first split, I think a delayed migration is one of the key factors that's contributed to that. So that's the thing I have to say about migration-wise right now. I think that's pretty much what I've seen from everybody I've talked to, my friends up the flyways. They all kind of have that same story, it seems like. They weren't getting birds, when they normally have birds. They're trickling in later than usual. That's perfectly fine. As long as they make their way down that flyway to us, that's all I care about. That's all you should care about, is if they make it here, great. That's what we want. We don't care when they make it here, as long as it's during the season. That's what we need. So hang in there. That's what I would tell people. Hang in there, because I think the best days are yet to come. And I've said that in a couple of videos that we posted on social media. Don't get discouraged. If you're one of those guys, you're getting into waterfowl hunting. I've talked to several people that are new waterfowl hunters. And, man, you talk about discouraged, these guys. And I'm on public land, so I talk to a lot of people at boat ramps, and I got guys that I've talked to, and they're like, man, I'm gonna go back to deer hunting because this sucks. Straight, just straight being straight with you. That's what they say. They say, man, this sucks. This ain't what I thought it was gonna be. And if you're the way I look at it, I tell people this. I say there's different types of duck hunters. There's different types of waterfowl guys. You got guys that are killers. They want to go out there and they want to kill a limit every time they go out there. And then you got guys that are socializers and they just enjoy the experience. And they want to go out there with their friends. They want to go out there with their buddies. And they don't care if they kill ducks or they don't kill ducks. They just want to go out there, have a good time, and they're there for the experience. That's the truth, So it's one of those things that there's different types of guys out there. You have family guys, like a lot of older hunters. They're not in it for the numbers anymore. They're in it to, bring their kids out, and introduce them to the outdoors. They're in it to go out there and make memories, So what I tell people all the time is that as a waterfowl hunter, if you stick with this for the long haul and for your lifespan, you hunt until your old age, you're going to go through phases, guys. You really are. You're going to start out in that phase, that learning stage, and then you're gonna go to that killer stage that I talked about. You're gonna be in it for the limits, most of you. That's what you're gonna be after. That's the pursuit. If you don't get a limit, it's gonna be a disappointing day for you. And then you're gonna go into those later stages in your career, like where it becomes more about the experience and just enjoying going out there. And then you're gonna have later stages, like I talked about, dads, granddads. They just want to get their grandkids or their kids out there and enjoy the experience. And that's what makes this sport unbelievably rewarding. It really is. That's what makes it special. And that's what attracts so many people to this sport, which is something that we're going to talk about and I want to talk about on this episode as well. It kind of leads me into that point. There's something with waterfowl hunting that is attractive to people, And I know all outdoorsmen are kind of in their own, their own mindset when it comes to what they love as far as outdoors goes, whether they love deer hunting more than, small game hunting or waterfowl hunting or fishing, whatever it is. But there's something different with waterfowl hunting, guys. And I tell people all the time, I say, us waterfowl hunters, you have to be thrown off a little bit to get into this if you get into it serious. You're not all there, and I'm included in that. And what I mean by that is it takes a special kind of crazy to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go in the freezing cold weather or the hot, humid weather full of mosquitoes, in the rain, in the snow, wherever the conditions may be, to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go out there and participate in a sport like we participate in. You got to be a little thrown off. Y'all admit it. You're probably laughing right now and saying, you know what, Jacob, you're probably right on that. But I think we are. I think as waterfowl hunters, we're just a little bit thrown off, man. So it's one of those deals. It makes it special. We gotta love it to participate in it, and that's kind of what I mean by making that point. But I'm gonna talk about this, and I want to kind of transition into this point. We talk about how there was a migration of birds this year that were here when the season kicked off, and I can tell you this, from what I've seen, what I've experienced so far this first half of the season, and people that I've talked to, is that pressure has played a major factor in the success of whether you had a good hunt or a bad hunt. And specifically, I'm gonna kind of target public land. Let's talk about public land, because a lot of people on private land, you guys aren't going to have to necessarily deal with what I'm going to talk about here, which is pressure. And maybe you do. Maybe some people, I've had guys, friends of mine this first half of the season, they told me they're having trespassing issues. They got leases. One friend told me, he says, man, I got out of public. I got a lease so I could get away from the pressure. He says, and we're having our own kinds of issues with trespassers coming into our lease, So, yes, I'm not saying if you have a lease or you have private land, you're not having any kind of pressure on your own. But when you're talking about public land versus lease or private land, it's a completely different type of pressure we're going to talk about right now. So, pressure, if you think that pressure on birds doesn't affect those birds, then I'm going to tell you something right now. You're absolutely insane. And I'm just going to say it. I'm going to tell you the truth. If you think that pressure on our public land wildlife management areas is not playing a part in the birds that are holding to our public lands, wherever you are, not just Louisiana, up the flyways, you boys in Arkansas, up the flyways, wherever you are, Texas, Mississippi, wherever you are, pressure plays a major factor on these birds. We talked about how we had birds here, or we all could, pretty much agree that at the beginning of the season when we kicked it off a few weeks back, everybody had a little bit of success. That's typically when you see a little bit of success early on, because we have birds that are here. I can tell you, just from my personal experience, there's a couple of pieces of public land wildlife management areas that we scouted pretty heavily before the season opened. Several weeks before the season opened, we were doing our homework. We were putting in our time on the ground, and they were holding birds. We were extremely excited. My small group of guys that I hunt with, which is mainly my two sons, and then I have a couple of friends that we hunt. We scouted. We saw a good concentration of birds here several weeks before the season started. The opener hit here in Louisiana, and everybody was banging, man. It sounded like a world war going on, basically, out there is what it was. It's the best way I could put it. Everybody's posting straps. They posting, limits. They posting successful hunts. Everybody's happy. The world is good. Yeah, we don't have the cold weather yet, but, man, you know what? We got birds. A week later, the second weekend of the opener, and this is areas that I hunted. I can tell you from my personal experience. The second weekend, it starts tapering off. You don't nearly hear the gunshots that you heard before. You don't see the full straps, guys bragging about, they're happy they're posting their limits, they're holding up their straps. You just don't see it anymore. They got guys that I know that opened up on public land, and it started deteriorating. They were able to hunt during that first week of the season. It started declining. And by the end of the week, they were like, man, birds moved out. I got to move to some public or private land. My buddy got a piece of private land. We're going to go hunt it next weekend. And then the following weekends, that was kind of the trend. The birds kept declining on public land. Guys that would normally hunt public land had to look at other options, go out there, maybe hunt a wood duck hunt on some private property, or make a hunt on some private property, for puddle ducks or whatever they were, divers, whatever it is. And that's kind of the way it trended. Well, the reason that those birds, we had those large numbers of birds, and this is, once again, this is my opinion, guys. I'm not a scientist or a biologist by any means, but I saw it. I'm out there. And you guys probably saw it too. Pressure, so much pressure at the boat launches, in the WMAs. And we're going to talk about a couple of things that I think contributed to that. Right now, a few minutes ago, I talked about how being a waterfowl hunter, there's something special about it. People are attracted to it. And we always talk about every year, guys will say, man, it just seems like there's more and more people at the boat ramp. There's more and more waterfowl hunters. When statistics, quote unquote, tell us that there are less waterfowl hunting licenses purchased every year, it's on the decline. And guys sit there and they shake their heads and they say, there's no fucking way. There's no way. I see too many people. There's more people than there used to be. Well, I've kind of been in the middle with that. I see the statistics that the government tells you, and that the licenses sold, the numbers of what they'll tell you. But then I also see people at the boat ramps, and I see it on public land here in Louisiana. And no, it doesn't seem like there's less people. But my theory, and this is my theory, and you guys that follow us have heard me talk about this before. My theory has always been that I think it's the amount of land available to us here in our public waterways that is shrinking, therefore making it seem like we have more hunters, when in reality, we're kind of just all piled into the same areas. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. You guys are with me on that. So what I tell people is I say, okay, you look at some of the areas, like when I was coming up on wildlife management areas, I hunted with my dad when I was a little boy. I hunted in college. I hunted, with my friends through college, after college. Then, now I'm 45 years old. I'm still grinding public land. And I've seen areas through the years that just became obsolete on our wildlife management areas. Whether you were in the coastal marshes or whether you were in the woods, in the timber, that type of stuff, areas like that. What I've seen happen is areas become obsolete because of stuff like, Salvania or water hyacinth or just, overgrowth of the vegetation. They're inhabitable for waterfowl now. So what it's done is it's shrunk down the acreage and the amount of water that we have to hold waterfowl to only certain key areas in these wildlife management areas. So therefore, where does everybody go? Well, they're going to go to those areas, right? That's where they're going to go. So what's it seem like? It seems like, man, they're crowded because everybody's in those areas. You can't spread out like we used to spread out. And a lot of you guys that are new to this sport, you don't know what I'm talking about because you only know what you've experienced since you've been doing it, But years ago, before Salvania took over, places like Maurepas Swamp, that's a great example. Maurepas Swamp's a huge WMA right here 10 minutes from my house in Gonzales, Louisiana. It used to be a waterfowl mecca. Most of you guys know the story if you're a duck hunter. Used to be able to go right there and it wintered thousands of waterfowl throughout the winter season. And now it's obsolete. There's hardly any kind of waterfowl that inhabit. I'm trying to get the right word out. Inhabit it throughout the wintertime, and they've changed their migration pattern from that area. There's other ones I see, like my camp right now. I have a camp. One of my camps is at or borders up to a wildlife management area near the Atchafalaya Basin. I'm seeing it right now, guys, in the swamps where we hunt. It holds, it used to hold big numbers of mallards. It used to hold big numbers of gadwall. Up until a couple of years ago, in specific areas I hunted personally, we were holding good amounts of, gadwall and good puddle ducks, spoonbill, stuff like that. I started seeing Salvania come into it, and it's taking over the swamp now. It's starting to do what happened to Maurepas Swamp here in my area that I live in. That's what it reminds me of. Now it may not be the same situation as what happened to that, but it's kind of a lot of similarities is what I see going. So it's starting to shrink down already. And some of these areas that I've hunted before long, I don't see it. I'm starting to look outside of those areas now to expand my horizons because I don't think that it's going to be there in the future for us to hunt. I really don't. And it's sad because I really think that, I really wish that our wildlife and fisheries would do a better job of managing our waterfowl habitat here in Louisiana in all areas and not just a couple of specific areas, And I know that these guys mean well. The system's there to mean well. It's supposed to be for the best, for the wildlife, for the hunters, for everybody. But we all know politics plays a part in it. And when politics plays a part in it, money is the root of all evil when it comes to that. So going back to my point about pressure, my point with these areas shrinking down and seeing and feeling more pressure on these public land areas is because I thought that it was, because of the acreage that we were losing and people were just more congregated and on top of each other. But I have to say that this year, guys, going back to this season, there's something out there that has led to an absolute boom in the amount of people that are interested in waterfowl hunting this year. And that's a good thing. That could be a great thing. And we talk about getting people involved in waterfowl hunting, getting people involved in duck hunting, in our sport, in this hobby. I'm all for it. I'm all for expanding it. I bring kids with me every season. I bring people, that are possibly interested in duck hunting that's never had the opportunity to do so. I bring them and I try to get them involved in our sport every season. In order to be able to, expand it and keep this hobby and this sport going. That's my part that I feel I can contribute. My social media platform, I talk to people all the time that come to us here at Last Stop, and they'll ask questions because they're interested in duck hunting or, I had a couple the other day. They were in their 50s, and they were from right around Slidell, Louisiana, and they hit me up on social media, and they said, "Hey, we came across your podcast. We went to your social media platforms. We watch you on YouTube, your videos. We found other guys here in Louisiana that are doing, material." And they said, "We're interested in duck hunting. We started duck hunting this year. We bought licenses for the first time. And we're getting into it and we're learning. And hey, I hunt this specific area that I'm trying to learn. Can you give me a little bit of feedback because we know that you hunt in that area?" And they asked me some specific questions about just ducks and how they react to calls and certain calls and this and that. And that's what it's about, guys. That's what it's so awesome about it. An example that I saw this week is Bo Brooks. If you guys are familiar with Bo Brooks, he's a big social media guy. He's with Higdon Outdoors, Power Calls, Marsh, does a lot of social media content. He's on Higdon TV. Just a great ambassador for the sport. And he went up to Arkansas for the opener this week and was filming for Higdon Outdoors TV. And a bunch of these guys in Arkansas was giving him shit, man. They had a lot of pushback once he posted some of this stuff on social media, saying that social media, all this filming was ruining, was going to ruin Arkansas and blah, 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 all this and all that. And guys, look, let's be honest. That's not the case at all. I mean, it's really not. People have been sharing information for decades, whether it was through social media. Social media is not new. It's been around for a while. GoPros strapped to people's heads and cameras strapped to people have been around. Before the whole social media craze, TV shows were going to these areas. You think TV shows that you used to watch or that your dad used to watch, would go to areas where they weren't going to kill ducks? They were going to the most popular areas that they could go to in some of the most popular territories across the flyways to film TV shows and expose thousands of viewers to these areas because they needed ducks to be, harvested on film to make a good TV show. And that was happening way before social media even came along. So, to say, hey, this is going to ruin the sport, I could name you 10 other reasons that's going to kill the sport before somebody strapping a GoPro to their head and posting a video on social media on public ground. I promise you. And that could be from the government standpoint, the state legislative standpoint, or us as outdoorsmen, the way we handle ourselves on these public grounds that are contributing to the sport being hurt more than somebody filming a video. And some people may sit here and listen and say, yeah, well, you're going to say that because you're a social media, creator. You film this type of stuff. I wasn't always like that. But I can tell you, I've been seeing it decline like many others through the years, long before all that came along, But it just caught me. It made me realize, I was like, man, this guy caught somebody who's so well respected, such as Bo Brooks, in the hobby, and just seems to be a great guy. I've never met him personally, but he seems to be a great guy. He does so much for the sport. And here you got guys that are ripping on, him for filming, when in reality, the pressure that's being put on these birds and these WMAs that I see personally are from a lot of these same guys that are throwing the finger at him, And let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about how, some of those things that I've seen so far this year, Like I mentioned, there is so many more people at the boat ramp this season than I've ever seen. And I don't know statistic, of course, wise, how many this year versus last year, this and that. All I know is what I'm seeing. I can tell you that I visited public land grounds that I've hunted during the week. And you used to go during the week when people were at work, and you didn't nearly see the boats that you saw on the weekend. You might see 4, 5, 10, boat trailers when you get to a launch, or people putting in the launch to go make a hunt during the week because they have a schedule that allows them to do so. But this year, we're there on a Thursday, we're there on a Wednesday, and you're pulling up to the boat ramp and you got 30, 40, 50 boats. And then on a weekend, there's a couple of WMAs this year. I visited first half of the season. On a weekend, you got 100 to 150 boats out there. It's insane. the amount of boats that I've seen this year. And one part of me looks at it and says, man, that's great. That's awesome to see so many more people coming out to participate in this sport. But then I get out into these public land areas and I see kind of what's going on. Is it a good thing? You know? And what I've experienced this season is a couple examples I'll give you. Mud motors with stage kits on them still. Now, that's something here in Louisiana that was a law passed last year to where you're not supposed to have any other stage kits or any of that type of stuff to hop up the performance on a mud motor to make it louder, make it perform more. They did that as a result to try to keep things quieted down, you know, try to keep some of that noise level down in the WMAs, that type of stuff, keep some of that pressure off of those birds. So I'm seeing that still go on. You know, a lot of guys, and you may be guilty of it. You may have a mud motor set up that's got a stage kit, voodoo system on it, and it's, you know, you guys know it's loud, but it's the cool thing to have on your motor with your group of friends, you know. That's just an example. Another thing is the music. The music, man. Turtle Box, and I'm not blaming Turtle Box. This has nothing to do with them, but Turtle Box has done a really good job of marketing to the younger crowd. I can tell you that for a fact because I'm seeing it, you know. So the other morning, just to give you an example, I get to a public land spot and I set up. I go in at the legal time. I get to my spot. I'm first to my hole, you know, and it ended up having a guy that came in, just as a side note. He came in and he told me he had built a blind and this and that and this and that. We worked it out. A young guy, and he was very polite. This young guy, he was in his early 20s, mid-20s. He didn't cuss me because I was sitting in his blind, or I wasn't actually in his blind. What I did was I got to the hole, and I set up just in the front of it in case somebody, you know, would come in and say, hey, that's my blind I built. I would never take a blind from somebody in that situation, you know. But this is a public property. It's a lot of blinds in the area. Everybody kind of builds and adds to them throughout the season and as it goes along. Well, anyway, we have a good conversation. I say, hey, I'm going to go over to the next spot. I'm a hunt not too far from us right here. We settled it, go over to my spot. I set up in my spot, and I'm old school, guys. I like to get quiet in my area. I like to let things die down, you know. Let that waterfowl and that nature kind of take its course. Let it kind of be quiet, you know, before legal shooting light. Well, a lot of guys coming in, that's not the case anymore. They're coming in 30 minutes, an hour before shooting time. And I have to tell you, when I talk about the music aspect of it, guys, I swear this area I was in, almost every boat that I had coming in, this was during the week, by the way. This was on a Monday. And this was not Thanksgiving week. It was the week before. These guys coming in, they have music blaring in the boat. And they are lights, you know, in the boat, and they flashing and this and that. And look, there's several of them I saw they had lights that were actually going to the beat of the music. So I didn't even know that's a thing in a boat now, but apparently it is. So, but my point is there's nothing quiet about the way these guys are coming in. And on top of that, several of them have stage kits on these motors that are loud as all get out. And they're running full blast to these areas that they're going to hunt, getting in, island, music blaring, lights flashing. And I can see, okay, hey, we get to the blind, we get to the area we're going to hunt, everything's good, I got the spot, I'm going to turn it off, and we're going to start throwing out decoys, kind of settle down. No, that ain't the case with the way these guys are rolling nowadays. What they're doing is they're pulling up to the spot, then they must know the guy who's down, you know, from them not too far away, or they're on their cell phones calling each other, and they all know they're hunting, and they're running back and forth to each other's blinds. I'm literally watching this, and I'm sitting with a guy who I hunt with a few times a year who's a relatively young guy himself. And I'm saying, I'm looking at it, and he even points out, he's like, man, he says, God, there's nothing quiet about what they're doing. You know, and he's a younger guy of that generation, I would say, you know. And I don't want to sound like I'm picking on just the younger guys, because there's a lot of younger guys in the younger generation right now, younger than me, when I say that, younger guys, that are doing it right. They're doing it respectfully. They're doing it the right way. And, you know, they're also aggravated. I see that happen, you know. But this guy was kind of aggravated. He was like, man, he's like, damn. He's like, they wonder why there's no birds, by the time legal shooting light comes around. And what's happening, guys, in my opinion, and this is once again my opinion, is how do we expect these waterfowl to come into these public grounds that we're hunting, overnight, say they're coming in there and they're resting. And then here we are, we're not following the rules with the stage kits. We have, loud mud motors, playing into the equation. We're running full throttle to our spots to get to our spots to beat the next guy. We have our music blaring when we pull into these areas. Let me ask you something. Do we think these waterfowl are going to sit around and hold to these areas? Or the minute they start hearing all this noise, guess what? They're getting their asses up off that water and they're moving out of there. So I literally think for a fact, I know on one piece of public property that I scouted during the first split, when we opened up, they had waterfowl sitting in there at night. They were coming back from, feeding areas, and they were resting in this public land area, WMA here in Louisiana. And then, like I said, the next week, you couldn't find any kind of waterfowl or duck on the water. We were jumping them up when we scouted, whenever we would, go in to these waterways in the dark. We were doing some mock hunts before the season started, and we're, going to our spot, and you would see waterfowl jump up, and they're jumping up because we're running in. But you factor in the noise and all the pressure of so many people hitting these areas at one time, and everybody thinking that this is duck hunting, the loud music, the lights, the stage kits. That's what a lot of young waterfowlers are being exposed to, and people that are interested in this sport are seeing, hey, these guys got $30,000 boat rigs. They got lights. They got speakers. They got sound systems. They got stage kits. They're thinking, these kids coming up are thinking, hey, man, that looks cool. I got to have that to be a duck hunter. And in the meantime, we're all struggling on public ground because of all the ruckus and activity that's going on. Am I right or am I wrong when I say that? You don't want to hear that, some of you, but that's the truth, and that's what I see happening, and there's guys that are going to say, oh, fuck you wrong. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I do all that and I still fucking kill limits, this and that. Well, you may kill limits and you may kill a limit, but you're not going to consistently kill birds throughout the season with those type of practices. You're just not going to do it. Not unless you're baiting. Maybe you baiting an area. Maybe you're illegal. Maybe you killing ducks consistently because you're baiting an area. And that's a whole different topic. I'm just saying that as an example. And I know that's far off subject, guys. But, I mean, if you're going to be that guy that sticks your chest out and says, well, I do all that and I don't give a fuck and I still kill limits. Good for you. Maybe you are. And maybe you're saying, hey, maybe the rest of y'all are just fucking mad because you can't kill ducks consistently, But maybe that is the case. Maybe I am mad when I'm sitting there in a blind trying to be quiet, do it the right way, and I see all this happening around me, and then daylight comes around and there's not a bird to be found when I know for fucking sure that there were birds holding to that area the day before or a couple of days before when we scouted it, or we were making another hunt and we saw birds because we stayed later in the day or went back in the afternoon to watch kind of where the birds were going. And where they were resting, where they were feeding, that type of stuff. That's the type of stuff that I'm doing as a waterfowl hunter, and a lot of you probably are too. A lot of you that are serious about the sport, that's what you're doing probably. You ain't worried about the fucking music. You're not worried about the fucking stage kits. You're not worried about none of that shit. You're trying to be as discreet as possible because, first of all, you're on public land. You're at a disadvantage right there as compared to probably a lease or, private land. Because of the pressure. You're doing everything in your power to be as discreet as possible, scout, put feet on the ground, find the birds, and go out of there and hopefully have a successful hunt by killing a couple of birds. But the point that I want to make is that all of this other outside noise that's going on, and some of these generations coming up right now thinking that that's how waterfowl hunting is, and that's what it's about. Well, guys, guess what? It's not. That's not what it's about. It may seem like that right now because that's what you've been taught. You haven't had nobody really teach you the right way to do it, or the respectful way to do it to other hunters. Not only are you disrespecting, other hunters around you, but the waterfowl, their habitat. You're in their living room. I tell my youngest son that all the time. I say, hey, when you enter those woods or you enter the marsh, you in their living room. They know exactly what's going on around them better than anybody else around them. So you guys that opened up the season and you saw all these birds at the beginning of the season, and then throughout that first week it started deteriorating, and then it got worse and worse and worse. And then now you're at the point where you're like, man, I don't even know if it's worth waking up to go. That's some of the contributing factors that I see, in my opinion, that contributed to the first half of the season being a flop for a lot of people as the first half went on throughout the season. Hey, tell me I'm wrong, guys. If I'm wrong, leave it down in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinion on what you think it is. But you guys are also, some of you guys are also the same guys that are going to say, fuck Ducks Unlimited, fuck Delta Waterfowl, screw them all, they short stopping the birds, blah, 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 blah. I hear all this shit from everybody. We all hear it, And you cannot be the person that's going to sit there and point the finger at these organizations and these guys that are hunting over corn in the northern portions of the flyway or doing their thing to kill birds and do it the way that they see is the right way to do it. But then at the same time, we're acting the way we are down here with the noise and all this bling, going on. I'm going to call it bling, I guess. All this stuff going on to distract the wildlife and push this wildlife out of our areas and then say that it's somebody else's fault and it's these big organizations' faults. We can't do that, guys. We can't do that. Sometimes we got to point the finger at us, and that's just the way it is. And if I'm that person, I got to realize it. Do I do everything right when it comes to it? I promise you I wasn't like that throughout my career coming up through the years. I fucked up a lot of shit. I acted the ass. I did a lot of things. You remember how I talked about there's phases you go through? There are phases you go through, and an adolescent phase in the sport is one of them. That's the way I see it, kind of like an adolescent coming up through his teenage years. But at some point, we got to make the correlation, guys, right there and say, okay, man, what we're doing probably ain't helping us, And if you want to be the socializer guy that I talk about or a group that I talked about, you want to go out there, you want to do all that stuff, and that's fine. If that's what you enjoy, it's your right to do it as a duck hunter or as an outdoorsman. And it's public property. You have the right to do it just like anybody else would. But my point is just look at the correlation between, hey, we had waterfowl to start out. Everybody putting pressure on them is already enough because we're coming in a mass flood to these public areas, of duck hunters. But then on top of that, we're also doing this with the loud music. We're doing this with the stage kits on the motors, the loud motors. We're running our motors throughout the marsh throughout the whole day or throughout an area the whole day, scouting, quote unquote. We're not giving these birds any time to rest. We got to change some things, guys. If we want to continue to have success, we can't just point the fingers at big organizations and, people the way they hunt up the flyways. Excuse me. We're the blame on some of it. Well, I'm not saying we're to blame on all of it. And I'm not saying don't go out there and have a good time. But what I am saying is we got to learn to correlate what we're doing, our actions on there, on these public grounds versus what the ducks are telling us is going on. There's a reason these ducks are holding there a couple of weeks before the season starts. And then as all this pressure unfolds, they just leave and we don't see them again. They don't come back. Then we're having to rely on another big front to bring these new birds down to us to be able to move into the area, repeat the same process again, and then we're going to push that wave of birds out, and they ain't going to come back. You see what I'm saying right there? It's just a repeat cycle. If we keep doing bad habits, we're going to get bad results on public ground here in Louisiana, in my opinion. So I don't want to sit here and sound like anybody's dad. I have my own sons to worry about, but I'm trying to teach my son, because my oldest son, Jackson, he's turned 16 here in January. He's going to have a driver's license. And the one thing that he is fired up about is being able to go and make some hunts on his own with his friends. But what I say to myself is, as his father, have I taught him the right way through the years? Have I taught him, hopefully, the right way to do it, to be respectful of the wildlife, to be respectful of other outdoorsmen, to be respectful of himself, his equipment, take care of his equipment, all that type of stuff, and I have. I look at it and I say, okay, I have. So hopefully, he'll do it the right way, but he's his own person, but at least he's been taught the right way. And part of what we do here on our podcast and part of what we do on our social media channels, our TV channels, is that we try to educate people. A lot of you guys have been doing this a long time. You may not find the content that we produce anything new to you, but you listen, you're intrigued by certain perspectives we have on things, and we all listen and watch for different reasons. But there's a lot of people who are coming into the sport and into the hobby that want to learn what it's all about. They want to learn what duck hunting is about. So they'll come to places like us or other social media, creators that do educational stuff, and they'll ask questions, or they'll watch videos, they'll listen to podcasts, they'll do all that stuff to try to learn the right way to do it, because they don't have that person to take them and put them under their wing and mentor them on what's the right way to do it, So I think that's awesome. If you're somebody who's absorbing content like that, I think it's an awesome thing that you're doing that, because I'd much rather see you do that from multiple people who have been around the sport than from hopping in a boat with a buddy who's not real respectful, not necessarily doing it the right way, like I like to say, quote unquote, once again, and, hasn't had anybody teach them the right way, and you learning from that person and thinking, hey, this is what I got to have, to be a duck hunter, to be a waterfowl hunter. And then you go out there, you don't have any kind of success in the field or little success in the field, and then you say, well, this ain't what it was, appeared to be, and I'm done. I'm going to hang up duck hunting, deer hunting, whatever, and you done with it, We can't pass it. We can't grow the sport at that point, if people keep dropping out of it. So I think it's awesome that people get to go to places like social media now and, channels like YouTube channels from, outdoor content creators and learn stuff, especially if it's educational stuff, And, yeah, it don't mean that person's always right, but I think people are smart enough to make their own decisions and follow people or get their information from creators that they say, okay, I think that person's doing it the right way. I think this person has some experience. I can tell from what they're producing, and putting out there to people, to the public, that I think they know what they're talking about, or I could pick up this from them, or, whatever it may be. And that's what's great about this whole social media content stuff coming into play. So, guys like Bo Brooks, like we talked about with Higdon, getting all that heat from, some of these Arkansas guys. That's not necessarily a bad thing, man, at all. He's exposing people to your state. And I know, you guys get a lot of pressure from outside states, but in the grand scheme of things, what you got special, keep it special. Embrace that love that people are giving you to say, hey, yeah, your state's doing it and you're doing it right, and you guys are blessed, and we want a little piece of that to come and experience it with you guys. Look at it this way. Think of the relationships you could build if you're out of state and you're in one of these special areas like Arkansas, flooded timber, and you have these people. Think of the relationships that you could build, guys, with guys from other states. From a professional standpoint, maybe you have a job where you can make business relationships to do business with each other down the road. From a personal standpoint, the relationships you can make, you might have friends from Louisiana, man, that can send you some of that good old boudin and good old cracklings, them chicken cracklings, all that stuff that you boys can't get in other areas. them boys down here in Louisiana and Mississippi and Texas, them boys could be your friends for life, and they could mail you a box of Boudin or something like that, you know. My point being is, man, you can make some friends, and Lord knows what comes out of it, you know. So instead of looking at it and saying this is ours, us here in Louisiana, I'm going to tell you boys the same thing that are listening to this episode. You know, Venice, Louisiana, that's a great example. A lot of guys are interested out of state and coming down to Venice, Louisiana. And I hear guys say, oh, I want to come to Venice, you know. I wish they'd stay in their own fucking state. We as guilty here as anybody else. You boys in Arkansas, you boys in Missouri, you boys in Kansas, Oklahoma, the Dakotas, up the flyways, you know, wherever you are. Hey, embrace it, man. Make those relationships with each other. Get to know each other. Instead of hating on each other, let's make those relationships. And I promise you, that's what's so great about this sport. All the relationships that we've made throughout the years, you know. And that's what it really is all about. So that's just my take on that, you know, as far as that goes. But really, first split, guys, pressure, pressure, pressure. Delayed migration and extreme pressure on the birds. A lot of hunters. Now, that's going to probably taper off as we get into it. The second split of the season, it always tends to taper down in the boat ramps. Guys will kind of hang it up. They'll get burnt out, tired of waking up early, that type of stuff. It'll die down. It will. And you'll start seeing that access and that, you know, a little bit easier. You don't have to wake up at 2 a.m. You can get there a little later, and you'll be able to go out to your spots. But I think the best is yet to come as far as the migration goes. That's what I'm excited about heading into the second split of the season. I think that's something that we can all look forward to. You know, now, just shortly, you know, a lot of my guys, my friends that are on private land, leased land, they've had a phenomenal first half. A lot of them have. And there's some of you guys that have private land that are saying, man, ours sucked, you know. But a lot of them, I know, especially, once again, I'm in South Louisiana, the coastal areas for sure. I have some friends in the rice fields, in the rice country that have private, you know, land. They all seem to be pretty happy with the way it turned out. May have started out slow, but then it kind of picked up. You know, it kind of picked up for them with this big cold front that came through. This last week in the East Zone was good for a lot of them. You know, but that just is another example of pressure, guys. They don't have, on that private land, there's typically not the pressure that we have on public land. So those birds are a lot less weary. They're willing to work. You know, one of my good friends, he does social media. He told me, he says, man, the birds have been working so perfectly. You know, we get these big groups of green-winged teal coming in, and they're working the spread. Man, you get good shots at them, you know. I watched one of his videos he just put out yesterday, and, man, they had a video. They didn't blow a single call. Didn't blow a call. It was windy conditions. They were in the coastal area, southeast Louisiana somewhere. Didn't have to blow a duck call. Birds were just working in perfectly for them, sitting down in the decoys. They had excellent shots over the decoys. And, man, that's just something you don't see typically on public land in these wildlife management areas that we saw first split of the season. We've had several conversations with people that I hunted with or my sons that hunted with me, and they're like, Dad, we'll get a group of teal, and they'd make one pass. And then normally, you know, early season, you hit that teal call, you give it a peep, or you give it a quack with a blue wing call, and they'll circle right back around, and they'll just come on into the decoys, or at least over the decoys, to give you a passing shot. And that ain't the case for us first split. I mean, it's a pass outside edge of the decoys, and then they zipping out of here. You know, they go. So it's different. You know, it's just different. Those birds have been around that area. They're pressured. You hunt a lot of stale birds. I just did a video on stale birds, what stale birds, how they react versus what, you know, new birds typically react and how they react. I put that out there for people to learn that are getting into the sport, you know, and to kind of have an idea of how to read these birds, you know. So my point is that it is different. You know, I'm not saying, you know, people always say, well, they got a leash, you know, they're going to have birds. My son says that. He's 16 and he's been duck hunting with me since he's 5. And I'll say, oh, such and such had a great hunt today to kill him. Well, they're on private land. I said, hey, guess what? A duck on private land can pick its ass up and leave within seconds and fly to Canada, just like a duck on public land can, or move out of an area. That's the thing about waterfowl. That's what makes it such an intriguing sport and so difficult as waterfowl hunters, is that it's not like deer that hold to an area typically, and you can get them on trail cameras and you see their how they react and what their normal daily routine is, that type of stuff. You know where they're bedding down, you know where they're going to feed, and you can kind of, hopefully, if you're a good hunter, intersect and be in between those two areas. With a waterfowl, waterfowl is just not like that, man. They can pick their ass up and fly anytime they want and get the hell out of Dodge, Now, guys that have had success on public land, this first split, I think most of the guys that I know that have had really good success this first split are guys that are able to hunt just about every day or every other day. And that always helps. No matter what, guys, that helps. Whether you're hunting pressured birds, you're hunting birds that are new birds coming in, if you have the ability to hunt every day, then typically you're going to have greater success than the weekend warrior guys like, us that work full-time jobs, especially like you younger guys that are able to get off of school. Maybe you have a break for school during Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is not a great example because everybody seems to be off, Christmas, also not a great example. But say you have school off and you get to hunt during the week. Last year, I can tell you, most of my hunts that were really good on public land last year, we were on a stretch first split last year, me and a couple of buddies of mine. And our success was coming on weekday hunts. We didn't even have much luck on the weekends because that pressure would ramp up. Nothing like I seen this year on the pressure, like I said, but it seems like even, now if you're able to hunt during the week with all the pressure we're getting, you still have better hunts during the week because there is less pressure. And that just tells you right there, it's another example that correlates the pressure to the waterfowl and the way they react. So late migration, kind of in closing on this episode, guys, on my take, late migration, that's played a major role in whether, you had birds or you didn't have birds, or the amount of birds you thought you should have, even if you had a good first split. You thought you may have expected more, and you didn't get it because that late migration. But the main thing, as I can tell you, is pressure. Pressure. Fucking pressure. I can't say it enough. Pressure. Yes, it's great. People are coming to the sport. They're out there trying to do their thing. You're going to have pressure with that, and that's normal. But the way we act out there in the field, the practices that we have in the field when we're scouting, when we're, pulling up to our duck holes, when we're running these wildlife management areas, we're treating other hunters, getting in confrontations with other hunters over blinds, and we're arguing up until legal shooting light. Any of that type of stuff. We got to reflect and look back and say, okay, that is negatively impacting the waterfowl possibly in our area that were here. The little bit that we had here, what are we doing to hold them here? What are we as outdoorsmen, as hunters, doing to keep those waterfowl in our area? As long as we can keep them here till that next push comes, that next cold front comes. That's what we got to look at, guys. And some of you are going to ignore this completely. That's fine. It's the way it is. I'm not your daddy. I'm not here to tell you what to do. You're a grown-ass man at this point if you're able to go out there and waterfowl hunt on your own, But don't be surprised if you keep having bad results, guys. And you may not give a flying fuck about the guy next to you because you don't know him and the blind down the waterway from you. But just look at it this way. If anything, you think about this, how it impacts them, their experience with the sport, and maybe they got kids with them. Maybe they got young hunters with them. Maybe they got new people that are down the waterway, new to the sport, that are trying to do it the right way and learn the right way to do things. How are you setting an example for the guy next to you? That's the question I try to ask myself. I always tell my kids that. I say, how are you setting an example in your actions, no matter if it's duck hunting or the way they handle the talking to somebody or, a negative setback, how do they handle it? Or a positive example, how do they handle it? How do you reflect on the people around you that are going to remember you when it's all said and done? It's very simple. We go to these public land areas, it don't cost us a damn thing to be nice to each other. I think that as outdoorsmen, there's a lot more good there when it comes to that than, bad. I think we all kind of work things out in our own way, hopefully. But my point is how does your actions reflect on the people around you in the area? How does it affect the wildlife, the waterfowl in the area? If you truly care about the sport, guys, we got to start looking at that stuff. Yeah, it's cool. It's a status thing to have the best equipment, the $30,000 boats, the flashing lights, the sound systems, the Benelli shotguns. All that's cool. You can have all that. Man, I have nice equipment. I have nice clothing. I have, a lot of that stuff. But what am I doing with that equipment? And when is the time to use that stuff versus not use it, specifically on public land, wildlife management areas, and how does that affect my season as the season goes along, how I'm using that equipment? I would tell you that pressure and how you put that or apply that pressure to the waterfowl is going to correlate directly to how good your season is, and how bad it is. That would be my take on that. So, well, guys, hopefully you've had enough of me rambling on. Hopefully you got a little bit out of this episode. If you guys agree or disagree with me on this, leave it down in the comments right here on our YouTube channel, our Facebook channel. I'd love to hear your take on it. What do you think? You think I'm on point with this stuff? Do you think I'm off? I'm full of shit? Either way, guys, hey, let me know what you think. Let me know how your season's been going as well. I'd love to know how your first split went. Some of you guys in the West Zone, you're not done yet. You have a couple more days to wrap it up. You have a cold front coming in this week. And hopefully we might even get one more hunt here with the Last Stop crew on Sunday. So maybe we'll get one more hunt as well. But we are wrapping it up. It's come very quickly. It's too fast, in my opinion. And really, I've learned a lot, even though we had a tough first split. We didn't nearly kill the birds we killed last year in the first split. We did have some good memories, man, with my crew. We learned some stuff too. We learned some stuff. We found some new areas. We kind of expanded for us personally, we kind of expanded on some areas that I think look real promising for the future. Also for the second half of the season, the near future, So I'm excited about that. Never stop learning, guys. Never stop. If you truly care about this sport and you care about being a good hunter and you want to make yourself a better hunter, you want to teach somebody how to do it right and be a better hunter, never stop absorbing information, which is why you guys are probably listening to podcasts like this one and many others, and you're watching social media, you're watching TV shows, you're trying to, learn more about it. Never stop that. Keep absorbing it. Keep passing it on. Keep doing it right and teaching people the right way, and we're gonna be fine, guys. It's gonna keep being the greatest sport there is out there in the outdoor industry, in my opinion, because we are unique. I told y'all, we're a little fucked up in the head. We're a little crazy as waterfowl hunters. I told y'all that. To be able to go out there early in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, wake up, go out there and freeze your balls off, go out there and, sweat your ass off, get bit by mosquitoes, have to light up 10 thermocells in your duck boat. We crazy. We're insane. But it's all worth it on them good days, ain't it? That's when it all comes together, when you have those good days. And that's those memories that we always later on, we're at our boy's wedding. He's getting married. We're at a bachelor party. And you always have those stories come up. And you say, hey, you remember the time fucking Joey did this in the duck blind and we did? That's the memories, man. That's when it always comes up on those successful memories and those successful days, those hunts. It always comes up later down the road, and it's something that you share for a lifetime as a brotherhood. So it's pretty awesome. I'm glad to be a part of this sport. I'm glad you guys are along for the ride in this sport. Whether you've been doing it as long as I have or longer, or you're new to the sport, all I ask is that if you're new, just remember, do it the right way, handle yourselves professional, and let's go out there and let's go kill some ducks. Let's make some memories and have a good duck season, guys. Until next time, if y'all enjoyed it, guys, let me say that first of all, if you enjoyed this episode, we'd appreciate it. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a follow if you haven't followed us on our social media pages or subscribed to our channels yet. You can find us on all the major platforms: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all of them, guys. Any social media platform. You can find our podcast anywhere you get your favorite podcast, whether it's an audio format or it's video right here. Share it with other outdoorsmen. We would appreciate it so much. We're so grateful to our audience. You guys have stuck with us for 8 seasons now we're in, guys. We brought y'all guests throughout the years. We brought you a lot of content. We hope you guys enjoy it as much as we do bringing it to you. And when I do these solo episodes, I can't tell you from the bottom of my heart, guys, how much I appreciate y'all. I talk to you at the boat ramps. I run into people all the time that say, hey, you such and such. We listen to the podcast. We see you on your channels. And, man, we enjoy the content, you know. That means a lot to us, guys. We run into people all the time like that. So thank you so much for the support. And if you support us right here on the channel, guys, also consider, supporting the sponsors that support us here as well. Companies like SRD20 Boat Care Products, Wingman Waterfowl, Blonde Grass Camouflage Materials, Cajun Country Waterfowl. All these great companies that we work with, guys, support us because they believe in what we do, and they make great products that we support and we believe in. Go check them out. Support those guys. They're small business owners just like all of us are, and go support them. They would appreciate it so much, guys. Until next time, this is Jacob, Last Stop Waterfowl Outdoors podcast, signing off. Y'all take care, guys. We'll see y'all again soon right here on Last Stop Waterfowl Outdoors podcast.